North Carolina Sports Network presents This Was Then. Exploring North Carolina's rich sports history with Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. Presented by NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state.
Welcome to This Was Then, here on the North Carolina Sports Network, a new show where the bold stories of North Carolina's sports past come roaring back to life. I am Mike Waddell, and today we're turning the spotlight around on the voices behind this very show. That's right, our resident sports historians here on the North Carolina Sports Network and keeper of that bold North State sports legacy, Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. Today's episode is about getting to know these two men behind the mic, where they come from, and what fuels their passion for North Carolina sports, and how they become two of the most respected voices on the past here in North Carolina when we're talking about sports. Before we dive in, today's episode is presented by our foundational partner here on the North Carolina Sports Network, NC Pork. They're raising the bacon and raising the bar. We'll, of course, hear more about NC Pork throughout today's episode. Tim, Todd, welcome to the North Carolina Sports Network as we go into our third broadcast season here from Murphy to Manteo. It is great to have you both on the other side of the questions in this initial episode of This Was Then. So let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up, and what was the first sports memory that lit the fire in you that would make this your life's passion? Tim, we'll start out with you.
So I grew up in the rural parts of Lincoln County, North Carolina. The area was known as Vale, largest postal address in the state at the time, but the specific place was Cat Square, small crossroads community in western North Carolina, and it's just part of the most rural part of North Carolina. But then so much of North Carolina, for those of you who don't know that much, may have just moved to Raleigh or Charlotte or Greensboro, somewhere. It's a rural state, and my roots are in that very part of the state. I guess I would say my first sports memory, I was born on a Tuesday night when the Tuesday night boxing matches were going on. They were broadcast nationally at that time. My dad refused to take my mom to the hospital until the fights were over. It was sleeting and raining and cold, and we had to go from Vale, North Carolina to Hickory, which is about a 25-30-minute drive, but the fights had to get over with first. My first real sports memory maybe was 1973, watching David Thompson play for NC State, Super Bowl Sunday, 1973, one of the greatest and worst days of my life because I saw David Thompson become a star that day, but I also saw the Washington Redskins lose to the Miami Dolphins to complete the Dolphins' famous undefeated season, and that was my team. And those two people, probably in 1973, my favorite athletes of all time, Larry Brown from the Redskins, David Thompson from NC State, and Secretariat. Those are three great, exceptional athletes. Still probably all of them rank high up there. But sports was part of my dad's life. He played Legion baseball. He played softball. He did all, he used to drag me all over Western North Carolina to play church league and recreational basketball. Me watching him play, not like it is today where dads are dragging their kids all over the place to watch the kids play. It was the other way around for me. So those are my first memories.
Todd, same question to you. What pulled you into the world of sports, especially the unique fabric of North Carolina sports?
Yeah, like Tim, I grew up in rural North Carolina, a little unincorporated village named Clemens in Forsyth County, a sprawling metropolis now. We've got multiple stoplights. I still remember when we got the first stoplight in. So 1970 was probably the year of my first kind of vivid sports memory. I became a Cincinnati Reds fan that year. Lifelong, still am. I hope they're doing well. And I remember betting my grandmother a quarter in the World Series that year that the Reds would beat the Orioles. So after the fifth game, when the Orioles vanquished the Reds, my grandmother called down to the house to collect on her bet, and my mother told her, "Well, you can't talk to Todd right now; he's out in the front yard crying." So, so that's kind of my first vivid memory of sports. My grandmother never did collect on the bet; she let me keep my quarter. That was the year also that I think NC State won the ACC basketball championship in double overtime against South Carolina. So that's probably why I became such an NC State fan. And then the 1971 Super Bowl was won by the Baltimore Colts over the Cowboys that year, and that's when I became a big Baltimore Colts fan.
And see, that's the beauty of the three of us talking about this, because we're all more or less from Western North Carolina. We're going to go ahead and pull you in there, McGee. We'll bring you into the light, so to speak, because where Brother Peeler is from Lincoln County, I hail from Catawba County, and we all grew up in that same era. And it's fun to talk about the sports of our era because it was so very different than the landscape today. There was no Carolina Panthers or Carolina Hurricanes or Charlotte Hornets. Now, there were once upon a time the Charlotte Hornets, but as we're going to talk about on a future episode of This Was Then, they used to be a football team in the World Football League, and the basketball team was the Carolina Cougars that actually had a three-way home between Greensboro and Raleigh at Dorton Arena, and then the old Charlotte Coliseum on Independence Boulevard, now affectionately known as Bojangles Coliseum. But it was a magical time to grow up in the 60s and the 70s and to be a sports fan here in North Carolina, because it truly was local, and some of the best stories maybe weren't off Tobacco Road. They were from some of the small schools in the state, and I know that's some of the passion that makes me excited about being one of the co-founders, along with David Glenn, of the North Carolina Sports Network, and it makes it fun to revisit with you some of these great stories that the Bold North State has to tell.
You know, one of the things that really ignited my passion was playing high school football, playing baseball. I was not good at any of them. In basketball, I was a great statistician. And that's the only thing I ever got to be. But I also got to go, my first football game was seeing the Citadel play at Davidson. First football camp I ever went to at West Lincoln High School was up at Lenoir-Rhyne. And going to the small places, my sister went to Western Carolina, spent many a night in Cullowhee driving on those roads to get there, going to see the remnants of Leonard Skinnard playing at the basketball gym in Cullowhee one night as the Rosington Collins Band. Just those parts of being part of North Carolina's culture it all started with the small schools.
Our stories, in particular, Tim, do cross over, because one of my first jobs that I had when I was in seventh grade was working as a sports information department assistant at Lenoir-Rhyne College, and then at the Observer News Enterprise in Newton, and at WNNC Radio. I was already doing the three-way job deal that would punctuate most of our lives. And when we come back from this quick timeout and word from NC Pork, we're going to talk with Todd McGee and Tim Peeler about their professional journeys, where they met, and how they have come to this point, host of the newest show here on the North Carolina Sports Network, and that is called This Was Then. It's a historical retrospective. It'll be on every month here on NCSN, and we're proud to bring it to you all across this bold North State on the North Carolina Sports Network.
North Carolina Pork is making a difference from family farms to your family table. With more than 46,000 jobs supported and $11 billion plus added to our economy, the pork industry plays a vital role in our communities. It's a legacy built on hard work, innovation, and a whole lot of flavor. From juicy chops to barbecue that brings people together, pork is more than a meal, it's a mission. North Carolina Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar. To learn more, visit ncpork.org. Good for the plate, great for the state. Hey folks, David Glenn here. Game day just got easier thanks to NC by Train. Whether you're headed to Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, or Greensboro, skip the traffic and enjoy the ride. You get free Wi-Fi, comfy seats, and direct access to top sports towns, all at great prices. Learn more at ncbytrain.org and travel smarter to your next game. NC by Train. Go Connect.
Back here on the North Carolina Sports Network, all across the bold North State, we're telling the stories of the people, places, events, and culture of this wonderful state. My name is Mike Waddell. I'm one of the co-founders of the North Carolina Sports Network, along with David Glenn. And I'm proud to have with me here today our host of our newest show called This Was Then. It will tell the stories of the highways and the byways and the big names and the names you never heard of, but you'll never forget after Tim Peeler and Todd McGee tell you these stories. And Tim, you are a true sports historian. You do a lot of work around North Carolina State University, but that extends on to the North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. So you're deep. You're a journalist at heart. How did that professional journey start for you? And was there ever a moment where you realized that you were watching history unfold right in front of your eyes?
So many of those moments throughout my career, and I will talk about those in a second, but I'd like to say, the very first time I ever thought about being a sports historian or a sports writer or someone who covered sports, I was sitting in class one day. I was foundering as a student of mechanical engineering at North Carolina State University. I was reading the student newspaper and not paying attention in class. There's a little bitty house ad in the newspaper that said at the top in bold letters, sex, sex, sex. And then at the bottom of it said, now that we have your attention, how about thinking about coming out and working for Technician, NC State's student newspaper? And so I went there. I talked to the two sports editors, Devin Steele and Scott Kiepfer. And then not too long after that, this big lanky guy walked in and they said, hey, let us introduce you to one of our current sports writers. His name's Todd McGee. And so we met that day. We became co-sports editors of the newspaper, and we've known each other, in the 41 years that have since followed during that time, and have been, great friends all that time. My professional path after I left NC State with a degree in English, not engineering, ENG though, it's still pretty much the same thing. My grades all went home as an ENG major. I started working Raleigh Times as an intern. I got a job at the Salisbury Post. I got a job down in Greenville, South Carolina, Durham, North Carolina, Greensboro. And then I went to work at NC State in 2004 after my job in Greensboro ended, and just was fortunate enough to be at some of the greatest moments in the history of college and professional sports. And then just really was always fascinated by it.
Todd, you have worked all over the board, just like Tim and myself, really focusing in on that media and PR communication strategy track. How did you use all of that experience that you've had to now to get to where you are right now? And I guess more importantly, how did you stay out of jail hanging around Devin Steele, formerly of the Gaston Gazette, and Tim Peeler? I mean, these are two sordid characters you've been commiserating with.
Who said he did?
You clearly haven't done your background check yet. No.
We didn't complete that part of the process.
So like Tim, I grew up playing sports, but I also loved to write. I think one of the greatest Christmas presents I ever got was a typewriter that my parents gave me when I was probably about 12 years old. I would watch basketball games on television and then go back to my typewriter and write up a game recap like I was a sports writer who had been to the game. I even started writing the Arden Drive newspaper about events going on in my little street in Clemens, Arden Drive. So when I got to state, like Tim, I was sitting in class one day and an upperclassman beside me was reading a copy of Technician. And I was like, what is that? And so he told me it was a student newspaper. And I said, where'd you get it? And he told me where he got it. And I said, well, how much does it cost? Of course, it was free. So fortunately, he didn't try to fleece the freshman and charge me $1 for his copy. So I went down and got one. They had an advertisement in it asking, soliciting sports writers. So I decided, what the heck? I love sports. I love to write. Let's go down and check it out. When I got to the office, they were asking me about my background in sports. And I told them, well, I was a runner in high school. I ran cross country and track for 4 years. And they said, well, that's great. We actually need someone to cover the men's and women's cross country teams this fall here at NC State. Would you be interested? So I said, sure. And so that's how I started sports writing after I graduated from state. Like Tim said, we were co-sports editors my last year there. Then I became a professional sports writer, working for the Wolfpacker. Then I went away and worked in the university setting for a couple of years, came back to Coleman Publishing, which published the Wolfpacker, but was the managing editor of their baseball publications. And then eventually transitioned into local government communications, that kind of stuff. And that's sort of where I am now. But I've always loved sports writing. I've always done writing on the side, and and I've always loved history. And so I think all of that combination of sports writing and history is kind of what led me and Tim to thinking about doing something like what we're starting here.
Couple of months ago, we had a part-time position open in my office at NC State in the University Communications office. And they said, hey, we found this great guy. He's going to come in. He's going to do some part-time work. He's going to do some editing on these emails that we send out to everybody soliciting money. And we can't wait for him to get here. And I said, oh, that's great. Who is this guy? And they said, his name's Todd. He's been in local government. It's Todd McGee. And I'm like, oh, you could have mentioned that to me. I've only known him for 40 years. And during that time, when he was working in the office right next to me, we said, we ought to just start talking and telling some of these stories. And maybe we should do a podcast. You and I, Mike, have talked many times about this concept. And Todd was an integral force in making sure we actually could get it done, because that's always been my issue. Is I'm so involved in so many things that getting something big, a big concept like this, was more difficult for me to get done while I'm still working in my professional life.
When you hear your stories, it is really amazing and it's fun. And that's the gift that I think we were given by the point in time when we were able to come up, that our creativity was rewarded because we got opportunities based on our creativity. Nobody gave it to us. We had to go out there and to create that. And to have the opportunity, it was mind-blowing to me that I could be paid or in somehow compensated to go and hang out at games and be able to meet so many of the people that were my heroes. And I have my stories, the people who really framed it up for me. And there's no bigger in my life than Ned Jarrett, the former NASCAR champion, because he went to my church. And he was also the promoter of the Hickory Motor Speedway back in the day. So when he came to Beth Eden Lutheran Church in downtown Newton on Sunday morning, sometimes after the Saturday night races up at the bull ring, he'd drive the pace car to church. And we all thought that was like the coolest thing ever. And then we would go home in February and see him in 1979 calling the Daytona 500, one of the most, iconic races back in the day. And that was before there was cable TV. There were, 4 channels and PBS. So, it was kind of excited, but that was the guy that kind of lit it up for me. And then later, Rick Strunk and so many other great role models, Woody Durham on the Carolina side. These are the guys I grew up wanting to be like. Who were those people for you, Todd, Tim? I mean, who were the guys that really made sports stick for you? One iconic figure in your life?
It never occurred to me to be a sports writer when I was a kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do, honestly. When I went to NC State, I was a computer science major, and I had never seen a computer in my life. A friend of mine was going to be a computer science major, so I thought, well, this sounds interesting. And that lasted all of one semester. And then I ended up getting into communications, and that's kind of, initially I thought I was going to be in television broadcasting, but I've got a face for radio and a voice for newsprint. So that's how I ended up becoming a writer. And, I grew up reading Lennox Rawlings from the Winston-Salem Journal and loved reading his stuff. He was so good. And others, and I was the kid who had the subscription to Sports Illustrated as a Christmas gift every year from one of my aunts. And so, Frank DeFord and Curry Kirkpatrick and some of those guys back in the day just loved reading this stuff. But again, it never just kind of occurred to me that I could do that for a living until I got to NC State and started writing for Technician. And then, I thought, well, this is fun. I love sports. I love going to the games. And this is really a great way to try to make a career. It's not lucrative, as y'all well know, but it was fun, and it was something that I really enjoyed doing.
Same way. Like I said, I was dead set on being an engineer, just like my dad was. My dad had gotten accepted to NC State in 1957, but had a full scholarship. All he had to do was show up in Raleigh, except for the fact that he had to pay a $15 room deposit, which he had no way of earning $15 to be able to go to NC State. So he went to Catawba Valley Technical College, got a semi-drafting engineering degree there, became a self-taught engineer. I was following in his footsteps, but at some point we all know we have to find our own path. And after 3 semesters of being in engineering, I made that fateful decision to go to the technician offices and really found something that I truly loved. My first beat for technician, when I got there in the fall of 1984, was to be the women's soccer beat writer. I had never been to a soccer game. I had never seen a soccer game in my entire life. But all of a sudden, I was a beat writer of a program that had just started. So we're all just kind of learning at the same time about what you're supposed to do here. But it just sort of ignited a passion, and I got to do wrestling. So I was working with some extremely interesting coaches. If you talk about Larry Gross and Tarantini and then Bob Guzzo, all of those guys really taught me a lot about what the inside of sports was like. But then right after that, when Todd graduated and I got the opportunity to be the sports editor on my own, I ran into a guy named Jim Valvano. And he was such a dynamo. I mean, everybody knew it. They had won the national championship in '83, but by '85, he was a national figure. And we had access to practice. We had access to him. His post-game interviews were just a master's class in basketball strategy and communication strategy. And he would grab the notebook out of my hands and draw up the play that he had designed on the sidelines to win the game. And I thought, you know what? I could do this forever if I was working with a coach like Jim Valvano, because it was so much fun and seeing him out in public and seeing him interact with people. And I thought every coach is going to be like this. And then I covered so many other coaches that were not at all like that. And Jim Valvano was not all like that all the time. We had some knockdown, drag out difficulties when I was working in Raleigh, when I was working for Technician. You know, it's a different business than you understand. And Todd made a great point earlier. I love writing. I love sports, but I really love writing. I love reading. And I tell anybody who ever wants to get into this business, if you're getting into it because you love sports, that's the wrong decision. You get into it because you love the opportunity to tell a story. You love the opportunity to write about something and explain it to people. I always like to say that I love telling the stories of other people and getting their names in the paper and letting people know who they were as long as they were right underneath my byline. So it's kind of a, it's definitely something that is self-serving. I will say that. I have done so many things that, just like this podcast, promote myself and promote things, but I want to tell the story of other people.
And that's our motto here on the North Carolina Sports Network. When David, Glenn, and I founded this in the summer of 2023, we said, hey, we want to tell the stories of the people, places, events, and sports, and now culture of the bold North State. I mean, this state has so much sports history, and I know both of you guys have such a special place in your heart for that sports history. It's so distinctive in North Carolina. I remember growing up, and so much of my fandom in the world of sports circles around ACC basketball, and it's seeing that cobalt blue screen with the orange and white writing and visuals on there from CD Chesley Television Network, and to hear Sail with the Pilot at the wheel. I mean, that was it. That TV cart, and everybody talks about that in March when they roll it in there on the quarterfinal day of the ACC tournament, and you could watch the 12 and 2:30 game. And the one day out of the year that people weren't running to go to the school bus or to get picked up out front was during that 2:30 game back in the day on Friday of the ACC tournament. What's the most thick, vibrant memory that you can't wait to tackle on a future episode of This Was Then here on the North Carolina Sports Network?
I think for me, it's just being able to relive some of the moments that we have, turned into grand moments awesome moments like that 83 championship, like Michael Jordan's shot in the 82 championships. But it's also to put it in a better perspective of we in the moment, turn those into legendary moments. But there's so many others. People talk about Babe Ruth hitting his first professional home run in North Carolina. Might be the least interesting thing he ever did in the state of North Carolina. He came here so many times to go hunting, to play exhibition games, to do things like that. Telling stories like Tesegu Shugashita, who was the first Japanese-born player in college football history. He played at NC State back when it was called the North Carolina School for Agriculture and Mechanic Arts in 1894. I mean, think of that. Japan wasn't even open until 20 years before that, and he came along and played college football as a native of Tokyo, coming here, not speaking the language, and playing the early game of football. People like that. I happened to be standing on the green when Payne Stewart sunk his putt in 1999, probably the greatest sporting event in the state of North Carolina that I ever had the opportunity to cover. I want to relive some of those moments. I've got an audio tape of Payne in the locker room at Pinehurst number 2 the night before the final round, and his last words that I heard him speak just to me was, somebody's got to win this damn thing. It might as well be me. And the next day, a legend was made in that 1999 U.S. Open Championship final round. I love those kinds of stories because it gives a different insight to where all of this came from.
Yeah, researching stories and ideas for this podcast and subjects, I've come across so many things in North Carolina's history that I was unaware of. In 1940, High Point had a female basketball player on their men's team. So I'd like to look into that a little bit more and learn about that. In 1953, a boxer from North Carolina A&T won an NCAA national championship back when boxing was an NCAA sport. He was the first boxer, Arthur Statham, the first boxer from an HBCU and the only boxer from an HBCU to win an NCAA championship in boxing. So that's kind of, there's a lot of things like that happened in North Carolina. The first college football game between two black universities was played in North Carolina at Livingstone back in the early part of the 20th century. So there's so many things, interesting things that happened. And then, more recently, we just want to talk to some of those people who were there when these things happened. Maybe that's not the superstars, but the guy riding the bench on a team that may have done something special. What was his perspective? What does he remember about those things? Just giving those stories a chance to come to life again.
Struggling with clutter, calendar chaos, or nonstop notifications? Let Emily Parks at organizeforsuccess.com help you get organized and take control of your time. She's a North Carolina-based productivity pro who empowers busy people like you to work smarter and stress less. Visit organizeforsuccess.com and schedule your free discovery session today. Hey folks, David Glenn here, inviting you to one of my favorite spots on the North Carolina coast, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach. If you're looking for the perfect blend of 365 days a year live music, tangy slushies, and plenty of other tasty cold beverages, beach town energy, and the big game on TV, Jimmy's is your kind of place. Jimmy's Bar is where the state's sports and music communities combine and come to life. Whether you root for the Tar Heels, Wolfpack, Devils, Deacons, Pirates, Mountaineers, Panthers, Hurricanes, Hornets, or someone else, you'll find fellow fans from all over the Carolinas soaking up the fun at Jimmy's. I'm David Glenn, and I hope to see you at Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach.
Gentlemen, it's that history. It's so deep. And telling the stories of these people from our past, some of the names you'll know, like a Clarence Big House Gaines, but how many people really know about John McClendon? You'll know about Dean Smith and Everett Case and Vic Bubas and Mike Krzyzewski. But do you know about Jerry Steele? Do you know about the great Jack Jensen? I mean, there are some incredible coaches that have come over the course of time, but we have so many things to tell in so little time, kind of like a Willy Wonka thing. But I do want to get to one of our favorite things here on the North Carolina Sports Network with you, Tim Peeler, and with you, Todd McGee, the new host of our newest show here on the North Carolina Sports Network. It's called This Was Then, and that is our rapid fire round. That's right. So we're going to ask you 5, maybe 6 questions. It depends. I might have a follow-up along the line, but it's your duty to give me the first thing that pops into your head in about 15, 20 seconds in backup of why you've chosen that answer. So if you guys are ready to go, let's go right now. First, Todd, what is your favorite North Carolina sports venue of all time and why?
I have to say Reynolds Coliseum. That got so loud in college basketball when I was a student there in the early 80s. I had the great fortune of being a student when we won the national championship in 1983. And that place would get so loud and so rocking and had so much history in it. It was just a great place to watch a game.
I'm going to go completely different than Todd because, I'm a contrarian. And I would say my favorite venue in the state of North Carolina is Reynolds Coliseum because it got so loud when Van Halen was playing there. And I saw them in 1985 and Hank Williams Jr. with David Allen Coe and Itzhak Perlman. And so many of the classical concerts came in there and you got to see, it was my first step into a place that could bring me basketball, but also wrestling and gymnastics and classical concerts and rock concerts and things like that. It was just a great place for me in growing up.
Gentlemen, the most underrated athlete in North Carolina sports history.
That's a tough one because there's a lot to choose from. We have so many of the great ones, but I think a guy who never really got his due because he played with David Thompson was Tom Burleson. He was a tremendous player, and he just kind of always played in the shadows of David Thompson. And you saw what happened in NC State the year after Burleson left, but Thompson was a senior. They were still really good, but didn't make the NCAA tournament. So I think they really missed having Big Tom in the middle.
I love Tom Burleson, and it's a great choice for somebody because he was the heart and soul of that championship team. David was obviously the talent. Monty was the drive, but Tom Burleson was a huge part of it. I would go somewhere different. I would choose a baseball player. Maybe, I just don't think, and I'll split it in two. I don't think people fully appreciate how great the Perry brothers from Williamston are. Right. Gaylord won 314 games. Jim won 215 games, 529 games between them. They both won Cy Young Awards. What they did, both for Williamston and for that part of the state and the eastern part of the state, and what they did for Campbell College, now university, was huge. And North Carolina's first sporting events, first true love was baseball, and those guys really brought it out.
We could just do a story on North Carolina sports families because you could go up into Haywood County and the Streeter brothers. You can go to Guilford County and talk about Todd and Mark Ellis. You can talk about the May family of Charlotte. I mean, you've got a lot of great family stories, and we'll get into those here on This Was Then in the months to come. Let's talk about music. Very big part of North Carolina, gentlemen. Tim, Todd, what are your soundtracks while you're doing your sports research? What are you listening to on your playlist?
I have a very modern playlist that basically is rooted in 1970s Southern rock. I don't go too much further back than then, but I walk around NC State's campus all the time, and when I put my playlist on, that is just AI generated, and it brings up all the different songs. It always comes up with Little Feat playing Willing or Fat Man in the Bathtub, which is my personal walk-up song, and things like that. Where was I born? I was born in the back seat of a Greyhound bus traveling down Highway 41. Those are the things that come up when I listen to that, and Irish punk music and New Orleans blues. So it's a little bit of everything.
I don't go quite that far back. I'm more like a late 70s, early 80s, alternate, new wave, that kind of music. I listen to Sirius XM, New Wave channel quite a bit, and also just random songs that pop in and up on my YouTube feed.
Okay, now I know that when we were growing up in North Carolina, you were a fan of NC State or North Carolina. There were very few Duke or Wake Forest fans, and the other schools, they had fans, but you were a App fan and a State fan, or an East Carolina fan and a Duke fan. You were never just one or the other. It was mainly a Carolina or a State fan. So I got to ask you, say something nice as two NC State graduates about the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Can you do that?
I'll let Tim go first.
I will say that I've always been able to just point to one thing. I appreciate Dean Smith. I appreciate everything that he did. Dean Smith was such a great basketball coach. This is how good he was. He turned me, or he put me, a little, very slow, pudgy kid who was 5'8" maybe, into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Because when he broke Adolph Rupp's record in the most college wins for a Division I coach, the story that I wrote that day ended up laminated and on display in the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. And if you don't believe in how good of a coach Dean Smith was, he put me in the Hall of Fame.
My middle son is starting grad school at UNC this fall, so I have to be a little more positive about it. But it is a great school, and I did work in Orange County for 8 years, and so I got to know a lot of people at the university working in communications type things, including Dean Smith's daughter. And so it was, it is a great school. They do a lot of good things for the state through the School of Government program that they have. So, it's I don't have a problem with them. I even have a pair of UNC socks that my son, the card, gave me that I'll wear around every once in a while.
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about that rivalry as we get on into November and into basketball season, because it's always a lot of fun, and we can go back and forth with the state jokes and the Carolina jokes. And it was always the difference between culture and agriculture is 27 miles was one of my dad's favorite sayings back in the day, a two-time Carolina graduate, but as a Guilford graduate, I can be an impartial arbiter in this debate between the Carolina and the NC State fans. Final item for you here in this rapid fire section, and it is serious because we're talking about pork, and there's football season in the fall, basketball season in the winter, it's baseball season in the spring, but in the summer months and really all 12 months, it is barbecue season in North Carolina. And I have to ask you, now, most of the people in the Whole Hog Barbecue Championships are pushing that Eastern North Carolina barbecue, but we've got some sons of the West right here. So, gentlemen, defend Western North Carolina barbecue and why it should be competitive with Eastern North Carolina barbecue.
I was having this conversation just the other day with NC State's new chancellor, Kevin Howell. Grew up in Shelby, Cleveland County kid, enrolled at NC State at the same time I did. And we both grew up on Austin Bridges barbecue in Shelby, right off of downtown. I firmly believe that any good barbecue joint should be just around the corner from the hospital, which Cleveland County Memorial is less than a mile away from Bridges Barbecue. It served red sauce. It served sliced barbecue, which is still to this day my favorite, with a boiling hot styrofoam cup full of red sauce. That's barbecue for me.
It's the sauce. You got to love the mixture of ketchup and vinegar. I love vinegar, but I love both sauces. Whenever I get chopped barbecue, wherever I am, I'm putting both sauces on there because I can't get enough of it.
Now, I still remember the Clements Barbecue Barn in Hickory. I don't know if you guys do, but I've been very blessed through our association here on the North Carolina Sports Network with the North Carolina Pork Council to attend, already over a dozen Whole Hog Barbecue Championship events. And I love barbecue from Little Washington to Shelby to Burlington to Wilson, all throughout Western North Carolina. But gentlemen, it don't get no better than Simms Barbecue back in the woods. And I really don't know what part of the Unifor, and I'm talking about Burke and Alexander and Catawba and Lincoln County, all there, all nestled together right there. Might even throw a little Caldwell in there as well. But Simms is good. I find the farther back off the road you get, it might be right around the corner from the hospital. But Peter, I tell you straight up, you go back in the woods and you go off a dirt road about 3 miles, you're going to find a little bit something different than what the mainstream might be chowing down on every weekend.
We used to go back in the woods down a dirt road, just like you said, to this big barbecue barn where we would go on a Friday night and go square dancing. And,
Right.
there's no better pairing in the world than barbecue and square dancing. And I proudly admit to both doing the whole square dancing thing. I learned the Virginia reel in school. I could do those things. I'm not a two-stepper, but I am definitely a barbecue connoisseur.
Final word from Tim Peeler and Todd McGee. They're the new hosts of This Was Then here on the North Carolina Sports Network. And gentlemen, I have to ask you about the first episode that we're going to share. We have about a half a dozen episodes already in the can. They're waiting to be put together by our Ace production team. But the first one, I got to tell you, was so much fun. And you've had some great conversations so far. We can't wait to bring them to folks right here all across the bold North State. But I have to go to the old gold and black because, here's two Wake Forest. A glass of the very finest red Ruddy Riders filled up to the brim, and you will bring it to folks with their late 70s signal caller, the QB1, the mustached wonder, the guy who did it for the old gold and black. We're talking about Jay Venuto. And Todd, I've got to imagine growing up right there in the shadow of the old Grove Stadium, this had to be a fun episode for you and Tim to put together for our fans.
Yeah, I remember that '79 team. The Wake Forest just kind of came out of nowhere and went 8-3 and went to this first bowl game, and it seemed like decades. And Jay Venuto was the guy. He hadn't played a down in his first 3 years on Wake Forest campus, and that's unheard of for a quarterback today. He would have hit the portal probably twice now if it happened back then. But he stuck with it and became really a legend, an ACC football legend, and he shared a lot of great stories from that team. So that was a great conversation. Like you say, we've had a lot of great conversations so far, and we hope to bring you so many more here on the North Carolina Sports Network.
That was an important episode for us because Todd and I both graduated from NC State. I covered Duke, Carolina, NC State, a little bit of everything, but we wanted to tell stories everywhere around the Big Four. I grew up with a junior high school principal who was perhaps the biggest Wake Forest fan any of us had ever known. Everybody else was a State or Carolina fan, but Ryan Shelton used to walk around with a big plug of tobacco in his mouth, chasing the girls around, trying to give them tobacco sugar, which probably isn't even legal today. But he turned all of us into, if you got really good grades, he would take you to a Wake Forest football game or a basketball game because he went to every one of them. So we learned a little bit about that. So talking to somebody like Jay Venuto, who, God bless his soul, Ryan Shelton, would take some of us to go see during that time. That was right in the middle of my junior high career. So it was great to tell that kind of story and to tell a story maybe that is not as well remembered as some of the others, the Choo Choo Justices, the David Thompsons, other things like that. So to me, that was an important thing to do, is to tell a story that was different than things that you might automatically anticipate.
That's going to do it for this special edition of This Was Then. My thanks to our host, Tim Peeler and Todd McGee, two walking encyclopedias with a whole lot of heart, and it's all centered right here in this wonderful state that we call North Carolina. If you have not already, be sure wherever you get your podcast to go ahead and visit, like, and subscribe. Also, go to our website, ncsportsnetwork.com, for the latest from David Glenn, The David Glenn Show. We have shorts, we have long form stuff, and coming up, we're going to be in Charlotte for ACC Operation Kickoff this week, and it's always fun to go down to the Queen City. For Tim and for Todd, I am Mike Waddell, reminding you that the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be heard again, as this has been This Was Then.